Hey, Martin, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. I'm doing quite well. Where are you calling in from today?
Montreal, man.
Montreal, Canada. Awesome, awesome. That's love to hear it. I've got a colleague that's up in, I think she's in, oh geez, Ottawa City.
Yeah,
Is that a place?
it is.
Okay, I think she's in Ottawa City. I think she's in Ottawa City. I'll have to ask her again. I don't think it's Montreal. Is it Montreal? I'll have to ask her. Besides the point. No, but thanks so much for setting aside some time to chat today. I know this is kind of an important topic as we talk about how creative formats are shifting and audience preferences, the whole thing. I went through some of your TikTok videos also in preparation for the call. You're doing some pretty cool stuff. So before I kind of dive into the weeds here, I'd love to, like, off the record or on the record if you care, what's your plan with the content that you're creating on TikTok? I'm just curious.
So it's come down to, I would say, maybe 2.5 years of experimentation. Since I had my first TV show, I had to cede all the rights. That's my story. Since then, trying to do a startup for rights management on the blockchain and whatnot. But then I started writing other concepts that were mostly franchises, and I tried to go the traditional route. So finding producers, co-producers, distributors or platforms that would be interested in the projects. And so I went all in. I went really deep into business development. I spoke to all the major platforms you could possibly think of. So I went really far into biz dev, made some great connections, built a quite impressive network of executives. And you know what? By the end of all these discussions, I ended up, realizing that most of them didn't really have an idea either of where the industry would go. So it's like everything's kind of up
Yep.
for grabs. And it gave me an insight that they don't necessarily have the buying power anymore because they're kind of at the mercy of the trends or
Yeah.
the way consumer behaviors are shifting. And to me, what that says is that there's a major gap and opportunity to dictate where that consumer behavior is going to go as far as content consumption is concerned. And so what I realized, to answer your question with my TikTok play, is that distribution that is going to be creator led is going to win most because the platforms that enable the best monetization strategies for any kind of franchise are the likes of YouTube and TikTok. So the platforms that enable the best monetization for creator led content. And that's where it's shifting. So I tried to force business development the traditional way. As a newcomer in the industry, I tried to really make my mark or position myself.
Mm-hmm.
But the traditional way, it was much harder with much higher barriers of entry for me as a creator, wanting to produce content than to do it myself. And so I think platforms like
Well, the
TikTok,
ownership is different too.
I'm sorry,
The ownership of the
yeah,
final product is different too.
definitely. And so these platforms allow the creators to retain ownership. So I was going to say they're incredible levers, which is funny. um, but I found that, if I could use these platforms as levers, then maybe I could prove that definitely there is a shift happening. Myself having spoken with a lot of these big media companies that are just starting to realize that, oh shit, that's where it's going. But there's something I talk about a lot. I don't know if you saw it. It's the rate of innovation and the
Yeah.
versus the adaptation. The rate at which big media conglomerates and companies adapt and adopt these new technologies is not fast enough to catch the wave of the way innovation is just exponential now. So I feel like there's been a rapture already, and I've been experiencing this paradigm myself. You know, and we could talk about, you know, the scope that media companies can cover versus a creator that's just like super lean and much faster, that can cover a lot more territory because of these platforms. So it's like it's a whole shift, and it's crazy to be sitting, you know, in the middle of it, you know, because it's like on one hand, I haven't yet succeeded as per the industry standard, but I'm getting some level of success on these platforms as per, you know, testing and validation of these kind of new business models are concerned. So I'm kind of in a weird spot right now. It's like, yeah.
But you're testing, learning, iterating, which is something that, again, as you're at your scale, you can do much more quickly. And to your point of like the scope media companies can cover versus a creator, I would like to go down there for a second, if that's okay.
Sure.
First and foremost, there's this perception that these media companies, whether it's Amazon, Apple, Netflix, the tech, the Mag 7 players, or the traditional, you know, 21st Century Fox, Universal, all those type folks as well, like they can spin up, you know, an infinite number of these smaller format content at scale pretty easily. But I think the point you touched on even better was that the creator already has the audience that's engaging with the content. So just because you can create content doesn't mean that the audience is there or even would enjoy that content. And so as we talk about that scope that media companies can cover versus the creator, where do you set that Venn diagram for the pros and cons between where media companies might still have a leg to stand on versus, hey, everything's going to creator now, they have no leg to stand on?
Thank you for your question. Listen, I think honestly, the big conglomerates and big media companies, they're not going away anytime soon. I mean, they have all the resources and power, right? So it's not as much of a dynamic shift as it is a collaboration path, which I think creators will have a lot of insight from being very in close proximity with their community. We're engaging with them, you know, getting the stats on the field, knowing what works. And I think the big media companies can use these smaller creators as levers to understand what the market wants. So I think it's going to be heading more towards collaboration. And I feel that the companies that are going to be able to empower creators the most and put them forward and their universes forward are going to be the ones that are going to succeed most. And I can give you a lot of examples already because, you know, being so early in the market right now as, you know, a startup or young entrepreneur and producer, I'm using a different strategy to find the treasures, right? There's a lot of people out there, creators, with so much interesting content and such interesting universes that are untapped because either they are not aware of how the traditional industry works, so they stay smaller, or they just
more niche.
Exactly. Or B is because maybe they are just content with where they are and they don't necessarily want to grow further. So there would be so many advantages for big companies to adopt better incentives or better strategies to align with creators that would benefit them. I think creators need to be, you know, put forward and forth. And I believe that's where collaboration can really flip the script in the industry right now.
I think that's a really thoughtful take that you just shared there. And, you know, as we talk about this concept of, you know, companies buying into some of these smaller creators or even sponsoring different pilots, projects, etc. I'm curious, I think the LinkedIn post that you had engaged with was talking about like the Cozy Earth example, for example, where it literally just having people go out and lay in their bed for a chance at 25K. And while it might seem crazy on one hand, it drove so many new impressions and new potential customers and such like that. So it's not just an entertainment play that we're talking about. We're talking about alternative revenue channels, different ways of splitting, exposure and what that actually means to different brands. And so as we start to invest in these tiny experiments, they can very quickly hit virality and go into these, balloon into these IP pipelines where there might be some sort of TikTok trend today, and then next week there's now a full-blown franchise in the works. Like, do you see this as this kind of incubator system for entertainment and commerce sort of merging?
Yes. So listen, I've been working on a vision for myself or the company that I would like to build, empowering these creators. And for me, it's all about collaborating and sharing ownership of these universes. So I think it's about finding niches that are enabling this kind of ecosystem building and collaboration, whether it's between creators, producers, brands, advertisers, like everybody aligned with that kind of ecosystem or universe will have value from just, coming together and all collaborating on opening their channels to maximize revenue share. Ultimately, everybody from and within that same ecosystem is going to benefit, So I think the more people come in together to build one kind of IP, the better it's going to be for everybody. But when I was talking about scope earlier, that's where we see it in action, because instead of just having one producer or platform retaining ownership, now you have like 5 to maybe 10 different collaborators owning a piece of the pie. And then with each and every one of them, you just also increase the scale or the target. You increase the target with which you can reach your audience. So instead of being so narrowed, both for your business development as a producer or as a distributor, going wide and having more collaborators just opens up more channels for distribution. And I think you broaden your target, and it's like everybody's winning. So the scope gets bigger, the target gets bigger, and I think the chances to winning altogether also increase.
So obviously, experimentation sounds great, can yield great results, but at the end of the day, most money hates risk. I think that's fair to say. So, as we look at, a traditional 10, 12 episode season might cost 10, 20, 50, 100 million, depending on, budget, et cetera. A TikTok series or an Instagram series or a YouTube series or streaming, et cetera, might cost, a couple $100, few grand, 50K, something that's, orders of magnitude lower from an investment standpoint. But I'm curious, from your point of view, where do you see ROI trending? Like, at what point are we going to start to see these smaller bets outperform the blockbuster? And you sort of touched on this in your last answer of having that shared ownership. So you've got different IPs in different areas, mitigating that risk from one series. But more than that, how can we start to see this ROI shift?
It's a very good question. I don't know if I can explain it in simple words, but I think it has to do with levers or leverage. So, for example, if you have a small community or ecosystem of creators working in the same way, expanding the reach of one specific niche or show, for instance, then you might have a better chance of scaling your distribution, because then the content can go viral and then you can get more money for your buck. Whereas if you bet on just one platform and one producer owns the IP, then it's like you got one shot to make it work. You're betting on one
Yeah.
platform, one strategy, one territory, whatever the licensing allows. But where you have an ecosystem, a group of people working towards the same direction, I think then you increase your leverage and at the end of the day. And it doesn't take much for this small group of people to generate as much results or more than one platform could or one big producer could.
Sure. And then kind of tying this all together, when we talk about, performance measuring or success metrics, that sort of thing, obviously the industry used to obsess over, box office or Rotten Tomatoes ratings, etc. Streaming equally so. Also, going into Cannes and doing the awards shows and that sort of thing. But I'm curious, from your perspective, as we're starting to see a more democratized landscape in media creation, creators, viability, et cetera, what is an actual key performance indicator, KPI or metric, that is going to matter when we talk about how these experiential formats or how these under the radar show productions, et cetera, are gaining steam, are succeeding, are driving revenue? Like, are we going to have a Rotten Tomatoes for, TikTok series or YouTube streamers or folks on Twitch? Like, what does that look like? Is that required? Is that necessary? Is it just follower count or likes or shares? Like, what are the metrics that actually matter within this creative environment versus the legacy environment?
I think it's going to be platform agnostic, meaning no matter the platform you publish your content on, no matter the revenue you generate from the platform, I think the value is going to be derived from the IP, like everything you can possibly generate or create from the IP. And by IP, I mean like the universe that can be many creators together, a community, an ecosystem, rather than the actual KPIs you can see from a platform. So to me, a great indicator of performance or success for an IP would be not necessarily the views or the box office numbers, but more so the amount of variations or spin-offs and whatnots that you could possibly generate from the community, from the IP. Like can it become a valuable franchise? Can it become over time an asset?
Sure.
Rather than just like a
Geico Gecko or Liberty Mutual and the Limu Emu and Doug, like little advertising worlds, the Bud Knight from Bud Light back in the day, Mayhem from Progressive. Like there are these IPs that are not tied to traditional media that do, to your exact point, drive unique and holistic values because you can take their story infinite number of directions.
Exactly. I think when we consider films or series as assets, as intellectual properties that can be expanded into platforms with creator-led distributions, I think that's when we're going to start talking seriously about how we can be at the forefront of this changing industry, whether we're talking about AI or not, because at the end of the day, we the humans get to decide what direction we want to take. And I feel like coming together around one platform, one story that we want to tell, I think that's where we also can all win and succeed.
I love that. That's such a great closing quote to end on there. I do have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure.
As we talk about, streaming in its traditional sense, whether it be, Netflix, Roku, whoever, how much longer until we can fully accept that, a creator going on Twitch or someone going live on TikTok or, creating these little soundbite snippets, 60-second quick films, etc. Like, should we how do I phrase this? Are they part of the streaming ecosystem, Or is this just a niche bubbling up that's going to grow and compete with streaming, which as streaming did to linear TV? Like, is this a totally separate thing? Or should we just go ahead and lump it into, no, this is streaming, even though it's not a Netflix or what have you. Creators are creating content. It's being accessed digitally. There may or may not be paywalls or ways to support the creators. Like, is it one of the same?
So what comes to mind is I would say it has to have character. So, when you come to stream something to a broad audience, it has to touch points with, the audience's interest. And for something to be worth streaming or distributing to a wide audience, it has to have some kind of grit, some kind of character with which the audience can resonate with. So, I would say no to your point. Like, we shouldn't necessarily look into these small snippets as like holy grail, clips that can be, I don't believe so. I really do believe though that sustainable and creators with a high degree of determination and a lot of character that, are, at it and have some personality, let's say, are the ones worth pursuing, expanding into a universe or a platform or an IP. So the more you can touch point with an audience, any given interest, I think it's worth pursuing. But it has to have character and personality, I think, that can resonate with the audience. And it's so much more than just like publishing a clip that goes viral. It has to be consistent.
Yeah. No, that's the adage in business to business is, just put out a newsletter about it. It'll be fine. Like, do you realize what goes into creating the newsletter?
Yeah.
Or a podcast. Okay, just stand up a podcast and, we'll talk about XYZ. Well, if you do that, you might have like 10 people listening to your episode, which is fine if they're the right 10 people, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to be. Gosh, no, this has been fantastic, Martin. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time here. What next steps look like? I'll get started on this tomorrow. So probably mid to end of next week, I'll email you back with the article. I'll make a graphic asset for you that you can share out on your own channels, what have you. But now that I've got you in my Rolodex of sources, anything new that comes up, I'll definitely reach out for some comments, or even if there's something on your end that you want to talk about, you've got my information. Feel free to reach out, and I'll let you know if I've got a spot for it. But it's been a real pleasure. I hope you enjoy the weekend ahead, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Zachary, for reaching out. Thank you.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
All right, bye.